about crypto native teams. So, Dan, I'm going to hand over my microphone to you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Shout out to Francis and the rest of the FACTBLOCK team for having us. Grateful to be here. My name is Dan. I'm the founder of Uptop Search. We are the market leaders in recruiting for crypto. We work with a lot of early stage, pre-seed to Series A, Web3 startups, and help them hire anything from BD, marketing, engineering, community, all the standard crypto native skill sets. And we're excited to be here talking to you today about building crypto native teams.
Yeah, thank you all for having me. Representing Movement Labs, we're making innovation accessible by democratizing the Move language, deploying it to other blockchains, and making its parallel processing and security easily accessible to everyone in Web3. Really appreciate getting to be here with you. Dan up top has certainly been an incredible resource as well as an incredible friend to Movement Labs, and it's an honor to get to discuss this with you.
Salute, salute. Cool. Well, there's a lot to unpack here. I know it's a topic, it's very relevant these days. There's a lot of early stage projects like yourself that have just raised and are looking to grow. So I figured we can kind of start broad and then dig a little bit deeper. But just to, get us started here, Coop, when you think about being an early stage project and, attracting talent, what are some of the main things that that are on your mind as far as like strategic ways to attract talent to an early stage project that, not everyone might be super familiar with yet?
So there, of course, one thing is having a stellar idea, something that people really rock with, get excited behind, and want to be early in. But that's just one piece of the puzzle. Beyond that, vibes and vision are the two biggest things when it comes to attracting and solidifying stellar talent in the Web3 space. So particularly your team, it's a family. You're going to be working very many long, hard hours with one another. And so it's important to have those synergies between one another, that you get along, that you respect, and hell, even admire one another. And then in terms of the vision, the long term, what are you in it for? What are you in it for even outside of Web3 are key things that I believe the best talent in the space are thinking of and when they decide which team they work with.
For sure. So is it fair to say that they have to, firstly be motivated by the project and the mission that you're on and what you're building, and then to bring them even closer and to really draw them in, that's when you talk about the vibes and the culture and all that kind of stuff. Is that fair?
Exactly. It's like getting the foot in the door versus staying.
Yeah. No doubt. So my question to you is, how do you, once you bring them in because they're attracted to the project and what you're building, how do you communicate what are your vibes? What is the culture? How do you, display that for them in an attempt to draw them in closer to you?
Absolutely. So as a founder, one of my biggest recommendations, and something that I think about quite a lot, is the concept of drinking your own Kool-Aid. That you need to truly believe in what you are doing, almost to the point where you sound crazy when you talk about it. Like, hell, not even drink it, swim in that Kool-Aid. So that you're finding the talent and the people who really want to go far with that idea. And it's this concept where even if it is so weird, it is so ambitious and out of this world, that you may be alienating a large portion of the workforce and potential applicants, it is that 0.1% that you are looking for who want to go all the way and are in it for the same motivations, have that same hustle and same dedication to that idea and vision as you. And so it actually is in your favor to be very visionary and talk about these ideas in the long term in such a way where you have no shame if it's something that might not even be feasible for the next 5 years. You're looking for the people who get there with you and want to build with you together.
Love that. Love that. How do you, to take that one step deeper, how do you communicate like what it feels like to be an employee of Movement Labs? Like, what's going to be your experience, Describe that family mentality and kind of what the engagement's going to be like for the new joiners of Movement.
Gotcha. So the first thing is that we don't have any employees. We have family. We have team members. And this is something that I particularly recommend at early stage startups, that you're not looking for employees. You're not looking for people who are coming to work 40 hours, put in their time, and then go on to the next thing. You're looking for partners. You're looking for those people who believe in the idea the same way that you see it and have those same motivations and energy to pursue that dream and build that dream with you. And so very flat organization, no hierarchies, everyone's door is always open. We see each other as partners and as equals. And that's something that's very key, this mutual respect for one another and admiration for everyone who is on the team, and they're given skill set, they're given ambitions and motivations, that we work together in such a way that we all pursue our dreams. And it's underneath this umbrella where we may be coming from different directions, we may be going in different angles, but it's that the prism, if you will, that directs this energy, makes it much more powerful and gets us to that end goal, winning together.
Love it. Love it. Question for you, I guess a little bit more specific to Movement Labs. Like when you're interviewing candidates, what are some of the questions that you find them asking you? Because, obviously we've heard this before that an interview should be two ways, right? An interview should be the founder interviewing the candidate and also as well as the reverse. But I think that's even more so accentuated in an early stage project that people, you're technically still in stealth mode and people might not know that much about you. So I'm sure they have a lot of questions for you. What are some of the questions that you hear candidates ask in interviews?
For sure. So oftentimes questions about the product, that is something that we love to hear. One of our recent hires, what stood out about him is in the interview, he was asking us tougher questions than most of the venture capital firms which we were raising from. That is an incredibly good look from in a hiring side of things. Asking questions about the product, asking questions about how you acquire users, asking about the vision. That's something else that we really love to talk about and jam on because it really is, in a way, a relationship. It is a family, this special bond that goes much deeper than any traditional relationship because you're working so often with one another. So those are primarily questions which we discuss, things regarding the product, regarding the vision, somewhat about the backgrounds of the team, certainly as an early stage startup, and particularly my co-founder and I, we dropped out of college, right? And so talking about how did we get to this point? And that's a conversation that we love to have in interviews as well, understanding like what brought you here? What brought you to Web3? Why did you come here? What are the things that interest you about this space? How did that inform where you have gone? What have you learned? What is your journey, your story? And where is your story heading? That's another key thing. It's like we always ask, what do you want from us, right? It's key to have that alignment and that understanding because at the end of the day, openness and honesty is the best policy.
100%. Couldn't agree more. Now, for any potential candidates that may be interested in Movement Labs and watching this, why don't you talk a little bit about the vision? Sell me this project. Sell me the vision.
Absolutely. So my co-founder and I, we were both some of the early builders in the Move ecosystem. Incredibly bullish on the language. We love Move. It's this foundation for the next generation of Web3 builders, enterprises, and investors with much better security, much faster processing. The way that it's been to market, it is very competitive. And so you have new layer ones, which are necessarily competing with others for their users, for their liquidity. It's a tough ask even in the best of markets, but in a very saturated L1 game where now people are becoming L2s on Ethereum, as well as so deep within a bear market, it's very difficult to convince people to leave their ecosystems, cross land and sea, brand new tooling, and brand new infrastructure, brand new ecosystem, right? And so as people who have faced those ecosystem and market constraints, we thought, what if we could democratize the language? What if we could bring this to market in a Web3 native way? And what that looks like is instead of asking people to come to us, we go to them. Like Amazon, we deliver Move blockchain environments to the front door of users and builders where they are today, making it as accessible as possible. As a team that is facing a very difficult cold start problem, incubating a brand new programming language, you can't cut corners here. You can't expect people to come to you. You have to meet them where they are. And at the core, that is what Movement Labs is doing. We envision a world in which the Move language and its unparalleled security and processing speeds are available to everyone, and that it becomes the backbone of the future Web3 ecosystem. And so it's within our prerogative to bring Move everywhere, make it as accessible as possible and eventually change the game of smart contract development, setting a new standard for security and innovation.
Love it, bro. Love it. I can feel the passion. And I think that's really important, as you touched on, as far as like bringing people in. Let's go somewhere else for a second. You touched on earlier before that you and your co-founder are both college dropouts, right? So here's something I got a question about is, from my perspective, I know that especially these days in this market, a lot of candidates, high on their list of priorities of things they look for in a new role is stability, right? And so, a lot of times when maybe they're interviewing you or they're doing their research on you, they might see, okay, here are two young college dropouts that maybe haven't built a successful project before in the past, and I'm not familiar with Movement Labs. So, how does that play out? How do you make them feel comfortable in that situation?
Well, one thing that I love about Web3 is this is one of the few industries in which youth is a virtue, and being a college dropout is something that I think has helped me more than it has harmed me. It certainly has led me to need to work a hell of a lot harder in order to prove myself, but that's something that I welcome. I love that pressure. I love everything that gets me to put in that extra mile. It's what I'm here for. We're here to take this to the moon, right? Every mile of gas that gets me every liter, what have you, gas that gets me 1 mile farther, I'll take it. So as it relates to recruiting and positioning within this market as a college dropout, I think particularly is showing the hunger and the drive. So for example, my co-founder and I, we both had built applications previously. We both had repertoires, which we were able to display and showcase, and a very strong journey and narrative. So for example, myself, when I was still in college, I was building a SPAC vehicle. I was just trying to build cutting-edge solutions with the blockchain, working with this fund of funds. And after we'd wrapped up that joint venture, came to the Move ecosystem, built the first yield aggregator there. And it was in my experiences building in DeFi, building at the cutting edge, facing struggles to onboard liquidity, onboard users and novel ecosystems that inspired Movement Labs. And so my resume, my background, it doesn't matter so much as the things that I had done, what brought me to those, and then the reasons that I came to the next things. And so we build this very strong narrative that people are able to rally behind and that can excite others. And I think bullish on college dropouts.
Nice. Okay. So, I think it's fair to consider you like a non-traditional founder, right? For the college dropout founder. Is it also fair to say that you probably like to hire non-traditional candidates with maybe not the standard, background?
I mean, we certainly welcome it. Firstly, and what's very strong about teams is having synergies. And so just as it is important to have very non-traditional candidates, it's very good to balance that as well with traditional ones. We're at this very interesting intersection in Web3, not only of business and technology, but of traditional businesses and this new wild west of what we are able to do in the blockchain ecosystem. And so I think that it is important to have a balance. It's more so to be the best you that you can be. If you're a non-traditional candidate, lean into that. That is your strength. And if you're a traditional candidate, you are just as strong for very different reasons, but the same cause. Love
that. Cool. So let's take that one step deeper. So, for a traditional candidate, you have someone with maybe like an Ivy League school or management consulting background or worked at, a big well-known project. But if you're and I guess, when you have that kind of resume, you kind of know what questions to ask that person, right? But if you're interviewing someone like yourself who, hasn't taken that path, I think the interview process might be a little bit different. Can you walk me through how do you screen candidates that come from non-traditional backgrounds?
It's about telling a story, right? So we ask the same questions that we ask them. Maybe it's less focused on the resume and entirely focused on the journey. But even then, when we're screening traditional candidates, maybe 20% is about the resume. We care much more about what their motivations are, what brings them to the space, and in what ways they want to contribute, where they want to go, where those visions align with us. And so my recommendation for non-traditional candidates is to be the best you that you can be and lean into those aspects of you that are non-traditional. It's like what they say when you are applying to universities, that you need to have a spike. It's not necessarily about being well-rounded. That as a non-traditional candidate, you can work hard, demonstrate that you are a hard worker, maybe have a portfolio of, say, articles of research or past projects you have built that you are able to demonstrate and show, and then have a good conversation with the team and discuss what your vision is, what brings you there. I think there can certainly be a very strong fit, and that's the best angle to go in that regard.
Yeah, I think it's a great point to have a story, a cohesive story to tell. And often, like, that's a lot of the work that I do with candidates for interview prep is like, even when I'm looking at a resume, and you know, one thing I often tell candidates is like, the resume is your chance to kind of frame the narrative and tell your story the way you want it to be told. So yeah, I think that's really important. But like, to your point, like you said, you kind of are open to a wide variety of like types of backgrounds and profiles. So how does someone stand out to you on paper, on a resume? What are you actually looking for? What is impactful? What jumps off the page to you when you're reading a resume?
So resumes vary in one direction in terms of the standard and the more traditional candidate. So in that sense, generally based on the role that we are looking for experiences within that category, tangible things. I'm looking for ways in which it might intersect with various bottom lines. For example, if we want to bring on, if we want to target certain ecosystems for our development, someone who has experience within that ecosystem is a very good sign. But like we had discussed, it gets the foot in the door, but it's more so assessing what is the culture fit here. What do they want? And where does this fit into the grand vision? How do we win together? How do we create a whole that is greater than the sum of its parts, which you may be able to get an idea from the resume, get some theory of how that could look, but it's really in the interview that it pops out. What I love are the interviews that feel more just like conversations than like an interview where it goes over maybe 30 minutes, 45 minutes, and we don't even realize. It makes so much more difference than just a resume. Because what's beautiful about the crypto space is that it's like a shallow pool surrounded by a tall fence. That there's a tall barrier to entry, that it's novel field, totally new technology. You read something for the first time, you maybe understand like one of four every words, right? But once you scale that barrier and get into the space, it truly does not go that deep. The barrier to innovation is so low that even if you are non-traditional, even if you come from a non-technical background, you can move mountains by working hard and by learning. One of the best developers that I know, he was doing neuroscience. He was working at a hospital, right? Started learning Solidity on the side, realized it was pretty damn exciting, and started building insane things. And that's something that I would want to encourage anyone in Gen Z, anyone in a non-traditional background, that the world truly is yours for the taking. That in this space, because it is so nascent and so new, the world's your oyster here. You can build to your dream's content, and that can get you where you want to go.
Love that, love that. Just a quick pivot, and we'll come back here, but quick pivot, which I think is relevant to this whole narrative that we're talking about now. Why don't you tell the people, why did you drop out of college?
Yeah, so myself, I grew up very poor in this cornfield. There's nothing out there, so we didn't even have college graduates where I was from. And I had always dreamed of going to a great school and then becoming a company man, that my deliverance would come from a big, strong, established company, taking me under their wing, nursing me, and then finding strength in that. As I went in through the career process, applying for all of these internships and learning the game of applying, learning how to recruit, I had high hopes. There were times where I became very distraught, eventually landed a very cool gig working at a pretty large traditional finance firm. And when I worked there, although I loved the team, I loved the product that was being built, I found it very exciting, kind of realized that the meta has shifted in terms of careers. For new entrants into this economy, it's not the same that you can go to a company, work hard for a few years, at least in traditional industries, and find some form of deliverance. that if I were to work at this company coming with nothing, I don't even know how I would find an apartment in New York with how expensive they are, how much salary, and how much in the bank they require. So I realized that path was sealed off to me. And around that same time, I started my first company. I was working with this fund of funds and ideating and building these very cool, novel financial products. I started failing a lot of my classes, started taking up a lot of my time. And then when I started working at this place, it was taking up all of my time. It's like I would be working there, I'd come home from work, I'd work on my startup, and I had zero time. It got to the point in which I had negative time. It became physically impossible to do both. And so I started thinking, where is my deliverance coming from? What is that excites me? What gives me energy? And what is truly going to be the best path to achieving my dreams? And I realized that in traditional industries and traditional structures, they've become very rigid, very solidified. Over the course of generations, this machine has been made in which it's very specified where people come into, the role that they serve, the way that they move, where they can go to and from. And in most general industries, you come in, you work your butt off, and you're not necessarily seeing any fair compensation for that. You put in lots of effort, you get very little. It all goes towards the top. In Web3, as being a very new industry, and being an industry where you are so highly incentivized to work hard, things are happening 24/7, I realized that this is where I want to be. I was looking for somewhere that I could dedicate myself to, put in all of my time, all of my energy, all of my thoughts, and you just don't get the same out in traditional spaces as in this industry. And so it became very apparent to me that there was no reason for me to be going into this job, which I was working, or any other similar job. And if college, the purpose of it, is to get this piece of paper that grants you admission into these jobs, well, if I'm not going to go for a ride, right, why do I buy a ticket to the carnival, right? So I pieced out of there and just started building full-time in a way that putting my back against the wall, putting all of my chips in one basket, that's what enables us to win.
Love it, bro. If I was doing my podcast and if I had my mixer board, I would drop a bomb on that, bro. That was fire. Appreciate that. So let me get us back on track here real quick. So back towards like interviewing and hiring process and things like that. We talked about some ways that candidates can stand out on paper. We talked about some, ways that they could tell a story and build a narrative that is attractive to you. But why don't you walk me through some red flags and maybe, some things that, would disqualify them. And maybe, I don't know if you have any specific examples, obviously not like throwing shade at anyone, but like, I think it's really helpful for people to know, like, what are the do's and don'ts, man, of interviewing? What are the turnoffs?
For sure. Well, I like to think of everything as a spectrum, and colors certainly as one of them, where one red and green flag is going to be information. So, for example, coming to an interview and not necessarily knowing what is going on. If you do not know anything about the product, about what's being built, well, what are you doing in that interview, spending your time, spending someone else's time? And that's not to say that it is a bad look to have questions. It's actually a very good look. It's kind of the more questions that you ask, not necessarily to some degree. Asking questions is a very green flag. But the candidates who come prepared with good questions regarding business models, questions that are clearly informed by resources, by documents which we have written, is very cool.
What's an example of a bad question?
I think that a bad question would be something that's on the deck. If the answer is like on page 4 of the deck, and we send over all of those resources, a little bit bearish on that.
Got it. Okay. Fair enough. So why don't we talk about comp for a second? I know that's something like very relevant on both sides of the coin when you're going through the process. Obviously, like let's kind of throw a situation out there that you're looking for, an ecosystem, looking to hire an ecosystem role for, I don't know, like a specific chain or whatever, and the perfect candidate was the head of BD at that, specific L1, and their comp package might have been really, really high compared to what you as an early stage startup still in stealth can actually offer. How have you navigated through that type of situation? Or is it just a straight up deal breaker from the rip?
You know, we've been in situations like that where there have been incredible all-star candidates, and we unfortunately had to make the decision that we weren't at a point where we would be ready to work with them based on those expectations. In terms of when we are recruiting, we look for people who want to align themselves as much as possible, because as I said, we look for partners. And that's something additionally beautiful about this space, that in traditional firms, you're looking for traditional candidates, traditional resumes, in which you put it through some computer, scans for keywords, just to see how is this person going to fit into the machine that we've built. Whereas with an early stage startup and within Web3, well, we are building this machine together. And so we truly are looking for partners, people who want to align as much as possible. And you know, as much as we can nail ourselves to this cross, which we bear, if you will, that is what we look for. One potential silver lining of those candidates with very high salary expectations is if they've been earning significant amounts, potentially they have some capital in the bank, and if they truly align with the team and are excited by the product that you're building, excited to be a part of this family, they can align on token. And Web3, the token is such a beautiful vehicle and a beautiful mechanism for alignment and value creation, in which you are able to hold hands together in equity and ownership of what is being built. And anyone who is in it for the long term is going to want that token more than they want cash. Because if they believe in what they are building, that token is going to be so much more valuable to them.
Respect. Let's see where we should go here. Is there any difference in the approach towards the hiring process, whether it's technical or non-technical candidates? Does that make a difference at all?
I think that it's strong for teams to have silos, in that although we do lots of communication and we work together, we win together, it is important for people to be in their wheelhouse. And so technical candidates are mostly going to be meeting with technical people. Other candidates will be mostly meeting with other people of their specific facet. However, it's very important, I believe, that new hires and people interviewing get to meet the team. So although you might not be meeting every different team within that certain set, you should be meeting all of those people, and that's part of assessing the culture, assessing the vibe with one another.
Going back to comp for 1 second, pretty simple, straightforward question. How do you come up with the numbers for the salaries that you're offering? Where do you get these numbers from?
I think generally what's really helpful, people coming from other roles, there's some expectation and there's some level which they've been at, which is able to set that standard. How we generally like to go for it is to kick things off. You date someone before you marry them in that. And so is start off somewhere, and then over time you look to scale that significantly with token allocation and with cash.
Cool. So you just mentioned like over time, like how are you? You know, we've covered a lot of ground so far, and it's very relevant in this moment, in this day for you. But as your company grows and scales, you know, how do you foresee that? How do you foresee that evolution affecting the structure of the organization, the hiring process, and you know, the vibes internally?
It's incredibly interesting. It's like looking at an economy as it grows. So let's think of it in terms of like the civilization games. You start off with your sticks and stones. There are abundant resources, but maybe not necessarily structures or form in which you're able to create crazy structures, crazy things with them. And so in early stage, it's very much this: you build your own seat at the table. Everyone has all of the tools. Everyone has sticks and stones. We're in this together. And as organizations scale, which is very interesting, it becomes optimal for you to have more structuring. Say you have a cobbler, you've got a woodworker, you've got a baker. It becomes necessary to create these structures. And then as you bring more bakers, more cobblers, you have a bakery. You know, maybe eventually you have a factory and distribution and a whole agricultural system. So it's very interesting as organizations scale and as things solidify in that sense. That's something that we're excitedly exploring, excitedly going a part of this process. But certainly it changes the way that you think of how resources are allocated, how you think of roles that are coming on. Of course, as an early stage startup and anyone who is starting something, recommend to think of it in that sense, where early on resources are abundant. It is about finding people to build those first structures and create those winners within your team that take it far.
You got analogies for days, bro. I love it. Love it. Let's see. I think, one thing that is always on my mind when I place a candidate in a new role and I want to see, both sides of the hire be happy and feel good about this is I always like to make sure that like expectations are aligned from day one. So you both know what you're getting into and there's no kind of room for gray area or disappointment. How does that manifest for you? How have you made it a point to set expectations with your new hires so that they know, what they're here to do and what you're expecting of them?
Yeah, like you say, being open, particularly within the interview. If your expectations are high, that needs to be clear before an offer is signed to be maximally respectful of everyone's time in this sense.
Cool. I don't have too much more. I know you've been speaking to VCs a lot lately. I think you closed your round. Did you close it? We'll talk about that another time. Stay tuned for the announcement. But question for you: when you are pitching to VCs, do they ask you about like the talent and how your talent attraction strategy? My question is, how important are the people, the partners, employees, whatever you want to call them, in the raising process?
Incredibly important, especially in early stage. VCs, they bet on the team. They bet on you as a person more so than on a product, than on a revenue mechanism, because it might not necessarily exist at that time. And so having an aligned team, having a strong team is very important at that stage.
No doubt, no doubt. All right, last question before we take it home. If for anyone watching who's not familiar, how would you kind of like describe your management style? And what are your thoughts on managing people? I mean, there is a lot to unpack there, and unfortunately, we don't have time to do that because these are a lot of lessons that I'm learning as a founder as well. It's challenging sometimes, but what's your thoughts on like management style, and how would you kind of characterize your approach?
So what's characterized the hiring at Movement Labs thus far is bringing on winners who are passionate about what they're doing, have strong vision, and strong energy, hustle for what it is that they're doing. And so management for me is how can I empower you? It is what can I do for you so that you can excel at the things that you are passionate about that are driving the bottom lines for the company and the organization. Certainly as organizations scale, it becomes, by necessity, has to become much more structured, much more hands-on. But within early stage, you're looking for those winners who are looking to lead and looking to run what they are building, to be a partner in that sense. And so it's like when you're bringing someone on for different functions, when you hire someone, you hire people that you can see being like a C-suite for that role, right? Especially early stage. That the first people that you bring on, you need to have that level of trust, confidence, and alignment in, so that your management is less, okay, we need this done, just shipping off orders, just shipping off things to do, but more so putting them in their corner, doing what they need, and being a champion for them, knock it out of the park.
Love it, love it. I see the shout out to the Movement Labs boys in the crowd. Salute to you, man. This was dope. Thank you for your insights here. I know I'm fired up about it. I think everyone's who watches this is going to be checking out the Movement Labs journey from here. Shout out to FACTBLOCK and big up the whole Korea. Thanks for having us, man. It's been dope. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was one of the most interesting sessions, I have to say. It sounded like a job interview.